Reality, as we like to call it, feels immovable. It feels like a stage set long before our entrance, solid and indifferent to our presence. The walls are firm, the ground beneath us obeys gravity, and time seems to carry us along like an unbroken current. But Terence McKenna would whisper, with that mischievous sparkle in his eyes, that this solidity is not what it seems. What you call the world is less like a cathedral built of stone and more like a mirage constructed from perception. It is not there waiting for you. It unfolds because you are looking. It is a fragile dream stitched together from symbols, habits, and invisible agreements among the minds of the living. Every color you see, every word you know, every concept that defines your experience of being, all of it is filtered through the lens of a nervous system designed to translate chaos into coherence. The tree is not green. The brain paints it that way. The sound is not real. The mind decodes waves of vibration into something it calls a bird's song. Reality is not a fixed object, but a dynamic performance, and you, your consciousness, are both the spectator and the stage. When you wake up each morning, something miraculous and impossible happens. Out of the black sea of unconsciousness, the I resurrects. From the stillness of sleep, your mind begins to rebuild the universe, your room, your memories, your identity, your entire sense of continuity. You do this so seamlessly, so automatically, that you mistake the reconstruction for an external fact. You say, "I woke up and returned to the world." But McKenna would say, "No, the world returned to you." Consciousness is the projector, and perception the film that passes through its beam. What you call waking up is the moment the film begins again, the reel spinning with the sound of your own thoughts. We believe the world is out there, immutable and solid. But imagine a being without human eyes or ears. Would it experience this same world? A bat perceives a cathedral not as stained glass and arches, but as an echoing chamber of shapes. A bee sees ultraviolet highways painted on flowers invisible to us. Each creature occupies its own world, a bubble of sensory data sculpted by evolution. And if reality changes with perception, then perhaps there is no single world at all, only countless interpretations woven from the threads of awareness. The world is not an object. It's a shared hallucination that consciousness keeps convincing itself is real. Our ancestors once understood this intuitively. Before science, before industry, before the spell of rationalism cast the world into lifeless matter, reality was a living story. Forests spoke in symbols, the sky mirrored the moods of gods, dreams were bridges between worlds. Myth was not falsehood, it was how the psyche sculpted reality into meaning. McKenna often spoke about how language itself is a kind of magic, an operating system for reality. To name something is to summon it, to fix its flux into form. When a child learns the word tree, the shimmering mystery of that living being collapses into a symbol. The infinite becomes manageable. But something is lost. The direct experience of wonder, the raw aliveness that precedes words. We trade mystery for meaning and call it knowledge. Yet this linguistic scaffolding is what allows consciousness to build its world. The reality you inhabit is a linguistic construct, a cathedral of shared symbols. You live inside a story told so consistently, so collectively, that it appears self-evident. But if you were to stop believing in that story, to suspend the spell of language even for a moment, the walls of the world would begin to tremble. Without the narrative of "this is real," the illusion collapses. That collapse is what McKenna called the end of the world, not an apocalypse of fire, but of perception. The end of the world happens every time you truly wake up, when the scaffolding of concepts falls away and you see reality as it is, fluid, dynamic, indescribable. Consider this. Every night when you fall asleep, your entire universe vanishes. The city you live in, your friends, your problems, gone. You don't even notice their disappearance because you, the dreamer of that world, dissolve with them. And every morning, you wake up and rebuild it all. Consciousness reassembles its theatre, puts the actors back on stage, rehangs the backdrop of the sky. You call this continuity normal life. But it is a trick of the mind, a delicate act of self-hypnosis. You are the magician who forgets his own sleight of hand. McKenna believed that recognizing this fragility is not terrifying, it is liberating. To see the world as a construct does not mean it's meaningless. It means it's infinitely malleable. Once you know the painting is still wet, you can reshape it. Once you realize that reality is an act of imagination, you can imagine better. The danger, he warned, lies in mistaking the consensus dream for the final truth. When a society forgets that its world is made of stories, it begins to worship its fictions. That is how ideologies harden, how wars are justified, how humans forget the shimmering mystery behind appearances. The map becomes more important than the territory, and we live in maps of our own making. Every day you wake up is the end of the world that came before. The person who fell asleep is not the one who awakens. The neural connections have changed, the memories subtly rearranged, the cells replaced. Continuity is an illusion built moment by moment. You are not a single self moving through time. You are a series of awakenings stitched together by memory. Each morning is a miniature apocalypse, a cosmic reset. The world ends, and a new one begins. So the question becomes, what world do you choose to resurrect each morning? The world of habit, of fear, of mechanical repetition, or the world of wonder, imagination, and conscious creation? The architecture of reality is fragile because it is alive. It responds to attention. What you pay attention to grows real, and what you ignore fades into non-existence. McKenna's invitation was to treat waking life the way shamans treated dreams, as a canvas of transformation. Reality is not there to be endured. It is there to be co-created. To realize this is to awaken not just from sleep, but from the trance of cultural conditioning. It is to step beyond the boundaries of language and meet the naked, trembling mystery that has always been there, waiting, pulsing, breathing behind the veil of form. And once you glimpse that, even for a second, the old world collapses. The illusion of solidity dissolves like mist in the sun of awareness. You see that there is no out there and in here, no separation between observer and observed. The world you thought existed independently of you ends. But in that ending, something vast and luminous begins. The same consciousness that built the illusion now stands free to dream again, not in fear, but in awe. The world ends every time you wake up, because awakening means seeing that you were the world all along. When you open your eyes in the morning, you believe you are returning to reality. The alarm clock screams, sunlight floods the room, and the body remembers its weight. You stretch, yawn, check the time, and step into the day convinced that the dream has ended. But the truth, as Terence McKenna would remind us, is far stranger. You have not left the dream, you have simply entered another one. The difference between sleeping and waking is only the consistency of the hallucination. The sleeping dream is private, the waking dream is collective. We call one illusion imagination, the other the real world, but both are woven from the same luminous substance, consciousness itself. The mind does not wake into an objective universe, it wakes into a shared agreement, a persistent dream maintained by language, memory, and belief. Think of the moment you wake, the sense of continuity, the rush of recognition, the instant narrative your mind generates. This is my room, this is my life, I am this person. Where did that come from? During sleep, there was no room, no life, no you. Everything had dissolved into the silent theatre of the unconscious. The instant you awaken, the machinery of identity spins up, reassembling your biography from fragments. Like a cosmic computer rebooting its operating system, the mind loads the data of selfhood and starts the simulation called my reality. You are the dreamer who has learned to dream with eyes open. But because you have agreed to call this dream real, you forget your authorship. McKenna once said that culture is not your friend. It is a dream factory, a consensus trance that teaches you what is possible and what is forbidden to imagine. The waking world feels stable because billions of dreamers are dreaming it together, reinforcing the same story through language and routine. Every time you speak, you are reciting part of that script. The language you use was given to you before you were born. The categories it contains, success, failure, good, evil, real, imaginary, shape what you can perceive. Language is a net thrown over the mystery, forcing infinity to take the shape of grammar. When you wake each morning, you are caught again in that net. You remember your name, your obligations, your opinions, all those tiny spells that reconstruct the familiar landscape of self. You think you are waking up, but you are merely remembering who you are supposed to be. The dream of civilization is an elaborate narrative about what reality is. It tells you that matter is primary and consciousness secondary. It tells you that imagination is fiction, that time flows in one direction, that you are a small creature on a spinning rock. But look closely. None of this is immediately experienced. What you experience are colors, sensations, emotions, thoughts, all inside awareness. The world is an interpretation of that awareness, not the other way around. To see that is to begin to awaken, and when you truly awaken, the world you knew dissolves. It doesn't disappear physically, it loses its tyranny. It becomes transparent, like a lucid dream in which you realize the dreamer and the dream are one. When you wake from a sleeping dream, you say, "It wasn't real." But how do you know? During the dream, it was real. You ran, you cried, you loved, you felt fear. The experience was complete. It was only upon waking into another level of awareness that you judged it unreal. What if this waking life will also dissolve in the same way? What if there is another awakening, another layer of reality behind this one? And what if the pattern continues infinitely, each awakening revealing that the previous world was just a dream nested within another? McKenna called this the fractal nature of reality, a self-similar structure of mind dreaming mind, consciousness awakening within itself endlessly. The dreamer wakes only to find another veil of dream. In this sense, death itself may not be an end, but simply the next awakening. The body dissolves, the story collapses, and the awareness that watched it all steps through another door. The ego fears that moment, because it believes in the permanence of this current layer. But for consciousness, worlds end constantly. Each realization, each deep insight, is a small death of the previous paradigm. To learn something truly new, something that changes your perception, is to allow one world to die so that another may be born. That is the essence of transformation. McKenna often spoke about the psychedelic experience as a laboratory for exploring these nested dreams. Under the influence of entheogens, the walls of the waking dream shimmer and crack. The structures of consensus reality become transparent, revealing the luminous web beneath. You see thoughts before they form. You hear the language of the world speaking itself into being. You realize that perception is not passive, it is generative. The mind doesn't observe the world, it creates the world. And in that realization, the illusion of solidity collapses. You understand that the waking dream is just as fluid, just as alive, as the night dream, only more stable because it is shared. The difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary is merely the degree to which you participate consciously in creation. To wake into this truth is to stand in a strange place, a world that is both real and unreal, both inside and outside of you. It's the liminal state between dreaming and awareness, where you are simultaneously the actor and the author of the play. Most people flee from this recognition because it destabilizes the story. If everything is dreamlike, what anchors meaning? But for McKenna, this was the birth of authentic freedom. When you realize the world is a dream, you no longer take its madness personally. You can dance with it, sculpt it, love it, without fear of its collapse. Because collapse is inevitable. Every world, every identity, every civilization is temporary. The only constant is the consciousness that dreams them. The waking dream is seductive because it rewards participation. Society offers comfort in exchange for forgetting. Follow the script, play your role, and the dream will protect you. But the moment you question it, when you notice the cracks in the scenery, when you see how arbitrary its rules are, the dream begins to thin. You may feel alienated, like an outsider wandering through a collective hallucination. McKenna called this the shamanic condition. The shaman is the one who remembers that it's a dream, who moves between layers of reality consciously. To live as a shaman in the modern world is to walk among dreamers without mocking their dream, to engage it playfully, compassionately, and with awareness that nothing is as it seems. So each morning, when your eyes open and your mind begins the ritual of remembering, pause. Notice the miracle of creation unfolding in real time. Before the first thought, before the first word, there is only awareness. From that silence, the dream begins. Shapes, sounds, names, duties. It all blooms like a holographic garden growing from a single seed, your consciousness. To see that clearly, even once, is to understand that the dream is not a trap. It is art. It is imagination learning to know itself. But the art is fragile. The more you cling to the form, the less you can feel the freedom that animates it. The dream solidifies into nightmare when you forget that you are dreaming. McKenna's voice echoes like wind through the veil. The world ends every time you wake up. He didn't mean disaster, he meant renewal. Each awakening destroys one layer of illusion and reveals another, closer to the source. The world ends again and again, and consciousness continues, learning through its own reflections. The dreamer is never separate from the dream. You are the dream becoming self-aware, the universe remembering itself through the eyes of a human being. The world around you, the walls, the sky, the language in your mouth, is a living poem recited by the infinite to remind itself that it exists. And every morning, when you wake and call it the real world, the poem begins anew. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispers that this too is only another verse, another dream, another temporary vision in the endless awakening of mind. And when you truly hear that whisper, when you stop mistaking the poem for the poet, the world as you know it dissolves, not into nothingness, but into the luminous realization that the dreamer and the dream have always been the same. The word apocalypse has been poisoned by misunderstanding. It evokes fire, collapse, catastrophe, the end of all things. But in its ancient origin, the Greek apocalypsis means revelation, the uncovering of that which was hidden. Terence McKenna insisted that apocalypse is not the destruction of the world, but the destruction of illusion. It is the unveiling of truth. The world as we know it, this web of assumptions, roles, and definitions, is a mask. To awaken is to watch that mask crack and fall away. It feels like death because the familiar dissolves. But what dies is not reality. It is the dream we mistook for reality. Apocalypse is not annihilation. It is clarity breaking through the fog of habit. Think about how easily we confuse our maps for the territory. We navigate existence through symbols, language, money, status, nationality, as though these inventions were the fabric of being itself. We live inside stories built on other stories, generations deep, none of which we ever stop to question. We inherit myths about who we are, man or woman, sinner or saint, winner or failure, American or Chinese, believer or skeptic. Each label is a pixel in the image of the self. And yet every one of these identities is temporary, conditional, invented. The apocalypse comes the moment we see through the costume, the instant we recognize that what we called I was only a pattern, a ghost of words wearing a body. McKenna often described the human condition as a kind of hypnosis. Culture, he said, is the operating system of the mind, filled with outdated code. The apocalypse is when the system crashes and you see the desktop behind the program. This can happen slowly, through introspection and curiosity, or suddenly, through the shock of a mystical experience. It can be triggered by loss, by art, by love, by psychedelics, anything that rips open the veil of ordinary perception. When that veil lifts, the world as you knew it ends, not physically, but existentially. You realize that what you called reality was never stable. It was a consensus hallucination, a social dream. The apocalypse, then, is not a cosmic event coming from outside. It is a psychological revolution rising from within. Every true awakening is an apocalypse of the personal world. When you discover that your fears are self-created, that your judgments are mirrors, that your thoughts sculpt the landscape of experience, the old world collapses. The end of your world may come quietly, a conversation, a sunset, a moment of profound stillness when you suddenly sense that nothing is separate. Or it may come violently, an ego shattering under the weight of revelation. But the essence is the same. The illusion dies. The false dissolves, and something vast, pure, and luminous rushes in to fill the void. It feels like an ending because the known is gone. It feels like chaos because the mind, which thrives on control, can no longer predict or define. Yet from that chaos, the new world is born. Human history itself moves in this rhythm of endings and revelations. Every epoch is a dream that eventually collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. The medieval world dissolved when science revealed a larger cosmos. The industrial world now trembles under the revelation of ecological and technological limits. McKenna believed that these cycles of collapse were not random. They are the universe's way of learning about itself. Consciousness evolves through novelty, and novelty often enters through breakdown. The apocalypse is not the failure of humanity, it is the next stage of its awakening. Each time the old order falls, something more complex, more inclusive, more self-aware emerges. But because we cling to the comfort of the known, we experience revelation as terror. The ego fears its own transparency. When the structures of meaning crumble, the small self screams, "The world is ending." Yet it is only the end of its world, not the world itself. What collapses is the architecture of ignorance. To the degree that you identify with illusion, awakening feels like death. To the degree that you identify with awareness, awakening feels like liberation. McKenna liked to say, "The world ends every time you understand something." Every insight, every shift in consciousness, every peeling back of the veil is a micro-apocalypse, the death of an old perception and the birth of a new one. Consider the child who learns that Santa Claus is a story, a small apocalypse. The magic dies, the myth dissolves, yet something new awakens, a more mature understanding of reality. Or the moment someone sees through propaganda, realizing that much of what they were taught to believe was manufactured consent. Another apocalypse. The structure of certainty crumbles, but awareness expands. These are small mirrors of the great apocalypse awaiting humanity. The recognition that consciousness itself is primary, and that matter, time, and identity are expressions of it. When that realization dawns collectively, McKenna said, it will feel like the end of the world, because every previous model of reality will collapse. In a sense, apocalypse is already happening, not through catastrophe, but through acceleration. Information spreads faster than comprehension. Technology outpaces ethics. The boundaries between virtual and physical dissolve. The old stories about nations, religions, markets can no longer contain the speed of novelty. This is why people feel time itself accelerating. The structure of the old dream is unraveling. We are witnessing the apocalypse of meaning, the end of one collective hallucination and the birth of another. McKenna called this the concrescence, the point where everything that can be known, felt, or imagined converges. To the unprepared, it looks like chaos. To the awakened, it is revelation. When you experience this on the personal level, it feels eerily similar. The apocalypse may arrive as a breakdown, anxiety, confusion, existential despair. You begin to sense that the world you built around yourself cannot hold. The career, the relationships, the ambitions, They all seem to lose gravity. You feel the ground disappearing beneath your feet, and yet, paradoxically, something inside whispers that this collapse is sacred, because only in the ruin of certainty can the unknown reveal itself. The apocalypse is the sacred storm that clears the mind of illusions so that truth can shine unfiltered. It is not punishment, it is purification. McKenna compared it to a chrysalis. The caterpillar believes its world is ending, unaware that the breakdown is transformation. In the liquefaction of identity, the new form waits. To the caterpillar, it is death. To the butterfly, it is birth. This is the paradox of apocalypse. The same event that looks like the end from one perspective is creation from another. The key is where you stand, in the collapsing world of forms, or in the eternal presence that witnesses their arising and falling. Consciousness does not end, only its masks do. And so, when the world ends, when illusions crumble, when meaning collapses, when all that was solid melts into awareness, you are not left with nothing. You are left with everything. The sky is still there, but now it breathes. The trees are still there, but now they speak. The self remains, but as transparency, not as prison. Apocalypse reveals that there was never a world to lose. There was only perception, forever changing. The revelation is that endings are illusions too, that creation and destruction are the same movement viewed from different sides. This is why McKenna urged us to embrace apocalypse, not fear it. To understand that every true insight, every genuine awakening, is a small death worth celebrating. The world ends again and again, not because something is wrong, but because consciousness keeps outgrowing its old forms. Apocalypse is the heartbeat of evolution. The moment you stop clinging to what is ending, you begin to feel the pulse of what is being born. The veil lifts, and you see that the end of the world was never the end at all, only the revelation that the dreamer has been dreaming this, endlessly, out of love for the mystery itself. When Terence McKenna spoke about the psychedelic experience, he wasn't speaking merely about a chemical or a drug. He was describing an ancient technology of consciousness, a mirror polished by plants, through which the mind could look back upon itself and remember what it truly is. He often said that psychedelics dissolve the boundaries of language and culture, stripping away the inherited codes that imprison perception. They are not hallucinations in the sense of false visions. Rather, they are revelations of how thoroughly our waking reality is itself a hallucination, a collectively reinforced construct. To step into the psychedelic space is to see that construction in real time, to watch the architecture of the world dissolve into its energetic essence. It is to awaken not just from the dream of culture, but from the dream of selfhood itself. Imagine the moment of entering such a space. The edges of ordinary reality begin to shimmer, objects lose their solidity, and something vast and intelligent floods into awareness. It is not something you see, it is something that sees you. The categories of inside and outside collapse. The voice of the plant or the molecule or consciousness itself begins to speak, and you realize that this other has always been here, silently witnessing your dream. The walls of the world melt not because matter changes, but because perception reveals its own fluidity. The familiar universe, your body, your room, your identity, begins to fold inward like a hologram being reabsorbed into light. You are left in a dimension made of thought, language, and archetype, where everything communicates through resonance rather than form. McKenna called this the Logos, the self-transforming voice of the universe, speaking in a syntax of light. To encounter it is to understand that language is not an invention of humans, but a fundamental property of reality. The cosmos itself is linguistic. It speaks in patterns, vibrations, colors, sounds, and symbols that encode meaning beyond words. The mushroom or the DMT entity, or whatever form it takes, is not showing you another world. It is showing you how worlds are made. The structures of geometry, fractal, and myth that you witness are the same structures through which your ordinary reality is built. The psychedelic mirror reflects creation itself, revealing that consciousness is the architect. In that mirror, the illusion of selfhood unravels. The I that you thought was steering the body, making choices, living a life, is revealed to be a character in a story being told by awareness. The narrator steps out from behind the curtain and sees that the play was always a monologue of the infinite. This recognition can be terrifying. The ego resists its own dissolution. It screams for control, for reference points, for ground. But there is no ground. There never was. Reality, seen clearly, is not solid. It is liquid imagination, flowing through the currents of perception. To truly confront this is to experience the end of the world. But again, McKenna's wisdom returns. The world does not end because something dies. It ends because something wakes up. In the psychedelic state, time loses its arrow. You see epochs unfold in a heartbeat. Civilizations rise and fall like breaths. The mythic dimension opens, a realm where symbols are alive, where the psyche and the cosmos interpenetrate. You encounter what McKenna called the Gaian mind, the planetary intelligence that has been guiding evolution long before humans appeared. You feel the ancient heartbeat of the earth, the pulse that animates both the roots of trees and the neurons in your brain. You realize they are the same pattern, the same fractal repeating across scales. The division between nature and self dissolves, and you experience directly that consciousness is ecological, that the mind you call mine is a local expression of the planetary soul. This revelation changes everything. The mind wants to anchor itself in the familiar, but the familiar has dissolved. Yet McKenna encouraged us to surrender to this dissolution, to trust the chaos, to let the world end gracefully. Because in the moment you stop resisting, the fear turns into awe. You see that what you took to be you was never a fixed thing, but a current of energy flowing through eternity. The loss of identity is not annihilation, it is expansion. The death of the self is the birth of the cosmos inside you. McKenna described it as entering the realm of the transcendental object at the end of time, a vision of perfect understanding where all opposites are reconciled. It is a state of total coherence, where every paradox resolves into harmony. You sense that all of history, all evolution, all chaos is moving toward this point, not an apocalypse of destruction, but of integration. The psychedelic mirror lets you see this timeless perspective, even if only for a few minutes. You understand that time is not a line, but a spiral, endlessly folding into itself. Each moment is eternity seen from a different angle. The world is ending and beginning simultaneously, over and over, in every breath. The power of this vision is not in escaping reality, but in transforming how you live within it. The psychedelic mirror doesn't show you another universe, it shows you the infinite depth of this one. When you return from the experience, the same world is waiting, but its meaning has changed. The trees seem to breathe, the air feels intelligent, your own body becomes a temple of cosmic processes. You walk through the same streets, yet everything glows with subtle awareness. You see how fragile and precious the illusion is, how easily it could vanish, and how miraculous it is that it holds together at all. You no longer take the dream for granted, you live it as art. McKenna believed this was the true purpose of psychedelics, to heal the rupture between mind and nature, to remind us that we are not strangers in this universe, but expressions of its creativity. When the world ends in the psychedelic vision, what is born is intimacy, the realization that there is no separation between the dreamer and the dreamed. The plants, the stars, the insects, the cities, the lovers, the fears, all are facets of one consciousness exploring itself. And this is why he said that the world ends every time you wake up, because each awakening reveals that the old world was a smaller dream nested within a greater one. In the end, the psychedelic mirror does not show destruction, but revelation. It reveals the living intelligence at the core of being. It shows that reality is not a prison, but a playground of infinite imagination. It teaches you to die before you die, to let go of identity, certainty, and control. so that you can see what remains when everything else is gone. What remains is awareness, naked and eternal, dreaming worlds into existence just to experience the ecstasy of awakening from them. The mirror invites you to see yourself as that awareness, to recognize that the apocalypse is not coming. It is already happening. Every time you open your eyes, every time you take a breath, every time you dare to see the illusion as what it is. A beautiful, fragile dream, shimmering in the infinite consciousness that you are. When the world ends, when the veil of illusion burns away and the scaffolding of identity collapses, something extraordinary happens. Creation begins again. Out of the ashes of the old world, a new one arises, not imposed from outside, but emerging from within consciousness itself. This is what Terence McKenna called the infinite rebirth, the revelation that every death in awareness is merely the opening act of a greater awakening. The destruction of illusion is not the end of meaning, but the birth of a deeper one. You come to see that what truly dies is only what was never real to begin with. The masks, the assumptions, the brittle stories. And what remains is life itself, raw and luminous, reorganizing around a new axis of understanding. The infinite rebirth begins in silence. After the collapse of the ego's architecture, after the language dissolves and the boundaries fade, there is a stillness unlike anything known before. It is not emptiness in the sense of absence, but fullness beyond measure. It is the womb of being, the primordial field from which all worlds arise. McKenna described this space as the point where the mind recognizes its own creative nature, where it realizes that the world was never out there, but always being generated from the inside. In that recognition, there is no fear. There is no need for control or narrative. The mind stops grasping, and what remains is pure awareness watching itself unfold. From this 0 point, new forms begin to bloom. Rebirth is the natural rhythm of the universe. Stars explode and scatter their elements into space, which then coalesce into new stars, new worlds, new life. Forests burn and give rise to new ecosystems. Even your body is a cycle of death and renewal, every cell dying and being replaced in a cosmic choreography. Consciousness follows the same pattern. Every insight, every transformation, every letting go is a micro-death followed by rebirth. The difference is that human beings often resist this cycle. We cling to continuity, to identity, to stability, as though life were a structure to be preserved instead of a current to be surrendered to. But awakening shows that to live is to die perpetually, to let go of what you were a moment ago so that the new can emerge. The rebirth that McKenna spoke of is not something distant or abstract. It is happening constantly, at every level of experience. Each perception is a new creation, each breath a new beginning, yet we rarely notice it because we are hypnotized by memory, by the illusion that there is a solid self moving through time. When that illusion dissolves, you realize that continuity itself is an act of imagination. What you call the past is a story being retold in the present, and what you call the future is a field of potential waiting to be imagined. The universe is not unfolding toward a goal, it is improvising, endlessly recreating itself through consciousness. Rebirth is its only constant. In the aftermath of an inner apocalypse, when your old world has ended, the rebirth begins as a soft recognition. I am still here. But the I that remains is not the same. It is not the personality, not the name, not the biography. It is awareness itself, untouched, unbreakable, vast. You realize that awareness has never been born and can never die. It takes forms and releases them like an artist painting endlessly upon the same canvas. This realization changes how you relate to everything. The tragedies that once seemed unbearable become chapters in a larger story of transformation. Pain becomes compost for wisdom. Loss becomes space for creation. Every ending reveals itself as a doorway. McKenna's idea of the archaic revival ties directly to this cycle of infinite rebirth. He believed that the modern world, having exhausted the illusions of materialism, is entering a collective death, a collapse of the old story of separation, domination, and control. But this death is not a tragedy, it is initiation. Humanity, like a species-wide shaman, is passing through the underworld of its own shadow to be reborn into a new understanding of unity. The archaic revival is the remembering of our original connection to nature, to the cosmos, to the living intelligence of the planet. It is the rebirth of the ancient wisdom that consciousness and matter are two sides of the same mystery. The psychedelic experience, the ecological awakening, the spiritual revolution, all are signs of this global metamorphosis. To participate in infinite rebirth is to become conscious of your creative power. You begin to understand that reality is not something you interpret, but something you generate. Each thought, each intention, each perception is a seed. When you align with awareness, those seeds blossom into coherent beauty. When you resist, they twist into chaos. The universe mirrors the quality of your consciousness. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is the fundamental law of experience. Your attention is the painter's brush, and whatever you gaze upon blooms in the light of your focus. The world ends when you withdraw belief from it. It is reborn when you imagine anew. This is why McKenna said imagination is the engine of being, the divine technology of the soul. To imagine is to give birth to reality. When you awaken to this truth, you stop being a passive observer and become a conscious participant in the creation of worlds. You realize that the real is not fixed. It is a field of potential shaped by attention and intention. Every moment is the Big Bang happening again, the universe recreating itself through perception. This recognition brings a radical freedom, the freedom to reinvent yourself, to remake your world, to turn despair into art and confusion into wonder. But such freedom carries responsibility. Once you understand that you are the author of your experience, you can no longer blame the dream. The world mirrors the state of consciousness dreaming it. If the dream is filled with fear and division, it is because the dreamers are afraid and divided within themselves. Infinite rebirth demands courage, the courage to die to the old patterns, to let go of familiar suffering, to embrace the unknown. It asks you to stop recycling the same narratives and to step into the blank space where the new can arise. The ego calls this void death, but awareness knows it as renewal. The same energy that destroys the old world fuels the birth of the new. The deeper you surrender, the more you see that creation is effortless. The universe does not struggle to become, it flows. The sun does not labor to shine, the river does not fight to move. When the ego's control dissolves, you enter that same effortless rhythm. Life begins to express itself through you rather than being resisted by you. This is the essence of rebirth, to become transparent to the movement of existence. You no longer act from fear or memory. You act from presence, from the immediacy of being. And that presence creates beauty wherever it turns its gaze. McKenna saw this as humanity's destiny, to awaken from the nightmare of separation and rediscover the living imagination at the heart of the cosmos. He believed that history itself is a gestation process, a preparation for the birth of a planetary consciousness. The chaos of modernity, the crises of meaning, the technological explosion, all of it, he said, are contractions in the womb of time, signs that something vast and luminous is trying to be born. Infinite rebirth is not just personal, it is collective. Each awakening contributes to the evolution of the species, to the emergence of a world where creativity, empathy, and awareness replace domination and fear. When you understand this, even the smallest acts gain cosmic significance. Every thought of love, every gesture of kindness, every moment of genuine awareness becomes a seed in the garden of rebirth. You no longer seek salvation elsewhere. You recognize that the miracle is happening right now, through you, as you. Death and birth, destruction and creation are one seamless motion, the breathing of consciousness. To resist this is to suffer. To surrender is to be free. And so, The world ends and is reborn endlessly. Each awakening is both a funeral and a celebration. The ashes of your old reality feed the soil of the next. The mind cannot understand this eternal cycle because it clings to form, but the heart knows it intimately. Every heartbeat is a birth and a death. Every breath is an apocalypse and a genesis. You are not merely living through this rhythm. You are the rhythm. You are the pulse of rebirth beating through eternity. This is the gift of the infinite rebirth, to see that nothing is ever lost, that every ending is a portal, and that consciousness, in its ceaseless creativity, is always finding new ways to rediscover itself. The apocalypse becomes not a fear, but a song, the sound of the universe exhaling the old dream and inhaling the new. You realize that to awaken is not to escape the cycle, but to dance with it consciously, to let each world end and begin again with love. And in that dance, you understand at last what McKenna meant. The world ends every time you wake up, because every awakening is a resurrection of the cosmos inside you. The end is an illusion, a shadow cast by the mind's need for closure. We speak of the end of the world as if existence could reach a final punctuation mark, as if reality could stop breathing. But Terence McKenna would remind us that there are no endings in consciousness, only transitions, dissolutions, transformations. What we call the end is simply a boundary between one dream and the next. The apocalypse, the moment of awakening, the collapse of identity, these are not terminal points, but thresholds. Life, seen clearly, is a perpetual unfolding, an infinite blooming that never concludes. The world ends every time you wake up, yes, but the awakening is endless, the dissolution eternal, because consciousness never ceases to rediscover itself. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking infinity. Every time you think you've reached the end, the horizon expands. Every realization births another mystery. Every revelation deepens the question. This is the paradox of awakening. The more you see, the more there is to see. The moment you believe you've grasped truth, it slips through your fingers like light. The self, too, tries to claim the awakening. I have understood. I have arrived. But in that instant, the dream rebuilds itself. The ego reasserts control, wrapping the infinite in a new costume of certainty. And so, the world ends again, not because consciousness dies, but because it refuses to be captured by form. The end is the mind's way of marking its own limitations, while the real, the living presence of awareness, flows unbroken beyond it. McKenna often spoke about this fluidity of being, this refusal of the universe to stand still. He saw reality as a process, a metamorphosis with no destination. The cosmos, he said, is a novelty-producing machine. It doesn't seek equilibrium, it seeks surprise. Every moment is a new experiment, a fresh permutation of consciousness exploring itself. In that sense, the world is not a stable object, but a verb, worlding, as he might say, a continuous act of creation and destruction. To exist is to be part of this cosmic improvisation, to dance in the rhythm of emergence and dissolution. The world ends and begins countless times within each second, and yet the awareness that perceives it remains untouched, the silent witness behind the motion. As you awaken to this realization, the fear of endings begins to fade. You start to see that the very structure of reality is cyclical, not linear. Day dissolves into night, death gives birth to life, galaxies collapse into black holes and re-emerge as quasars. There is no final curtain, no ultimate apocalypse, only transformation. Even your thoughts mirror this pattern. Each one arises, blooms, fades, and gives way to another. The mind is an echo of the universe's own rhythm. The terror of the end comes only when you cling to form, to identity, to meaning, to the illusion of permanence. When you release the need for continuity, the end becomes liberation. The destruction of the world is no longer tragedy. It is revelation, the return of form to formlessness, of the dream to the dreamer. McKenna described this endless unfolding as the cosmic game of self-discovery. Consciousness hides itself in form only to rediscover itself again. It forgets its infinity so that it can experience the joy of remembering. Each life, each universe, each moment of awareness is a spark in this vast play of forgetting and remembering. You are not merely a spectator, you are the play itself, acting out its infinite variations. The end never comes because there is nothing outside the play, no vantage point from which to stop the performance. The world ends only for those who still believe in beginnings. To live in this awareness is to move beyond hope and despair, beyond gain and loss. The opposites lose their meaning when you realize they are part of the same pulse. What dies and what is born are one continuous wave, and you are the ocean beneath it. McKenna's vision was not of a static enlightenment where all questions vanish, but of a dynamic awakening, a state of perpetual astonishment. The message of psychedelics, he said, is that there is another world, but it is in this one. The end of the world is not an event in time. It is the instant when perception shifts, when you see the infinite fractal nature of being shimmering behind appearances. Every moment is that instant, if you have the eyes to see. In this state of clarity, you begin to laugh, not out of mockery, but out of recognition. The great cosmic joke reveals itself, that there was never anything to fear, never anything to lose. The apocalypse you dreaded was only the collapse of illusion, the shedding of false skin. What remains is the unnameable, the eternal presence that wears all forms yet belongs to none. The laughter is the sound of release, the sigh of consciousness finally relaxing into its own infinity. McKenna's grin, his mischievous delight in the mystery, came from this place. He had seen the game and could never take the nightmare seriously again. The world ends, and you laugh, because now you know it was a dream all along. But the beauty of this realization is not in escape, it is in participation. Once you have seen through the illusion, you don't float away into abstraction. You return to the world, but differently. You walk the same streets, speak the same language, engage with the same people, yet everything is infused with sacredness. The world is no longer a prison, but a painting, and you are both the viewer and the artist. Every sound becomes a note in the cosmic symphony, every face a mirror of the same consciousness looking back at itself. To live after awakening is to live as a lucid dreamer, to create deliberately while knowing it is a dream. This is not detachment, it is devotion. You honor the play by participating fully, knowing its impermanence is what makes it beautiful. This endless cycle of death and rebirth, of worlds ending and beginning, is the heartbeat of existence. It is the pulse that animates galaxies and thoughts alike. McKenna called it the transcendental object at the end of time, but perhaps it is better described as the transcendental motion within time, the constant flow toward greater awareness. The world does not end once and for all, because awareness itself is the engine of creation. The end that never ends is consciousness expanding, consuming its own ignorance, transforming chaos into insight. And as long as awareness exists, the universe will continue to unfold in ever new forms. The personal dimension of this realization is profound. When you understand that every loss, every failure, every grief is part of this eternal rhythm, suffering softens. You stop resisting change because you see that resistance is futile. The current will move regardless. You learn to die gracefully, not just at the end of life, but in every moment. To die to the past, to expectations, to attachment. Each death is an opening, a breath, a chance for new creation. The heart, once closed by fear, begins to bloom in the face of impermanence. Love becomes your natural response to the fleetingness of all things. You love because you know it will vanish. You give because you know it cannot last. And in that vulnerability, you touch eternity. So the world ends every time you wake up, not with thunder or despair, but with the quiet realization that it was never there to begin with. Each awakening dissolves one layer of illusion and reveals another dream beneath it, finer, subtler, closer to the source. The process never concludes because consciousness never stops exploring itself. This is the eternal apocalypse, not destruction, but revelation without end. McKenna's philosophy was not about escaping reality, but celebrating its infinite renewal. The universe is not a tragedy, but an improvisation, a cosmic jazz piece where every note is both an ending and a beginning. In the end, or rather in the absence of an end, there is only awareness, endlessly dreaming, endlessly waking. The self, the world, the cosmos, all flicker in and out like sparks in an infinite fire. The apocalypse is perpetual, and so is creation. Every breath, every heartbeat, every act of perception is the universe ending and beginning again. To awaken to this is to live in awe, to see that nothing is ever lost, nothing ever truly dies. The end never ends because the dreamer never stops dreaming. And perhaps that is McKenna's final gift to us, the understanding that awakening is not a single moment of transcendence, but an eternal process of dissolution and renewal. The world ends every time you wake up, but you never stop waking. You are the apocalypse and the rebirth, the silence before creation and the song that follows. You are the witness and the dream. You are the end that never ends.